In 2015, OpenAI started as a nonprofit open source consortium with commitments of $1 billion from a number of tech leaders, including Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, and Peter Thiel, along with AVS, Infosys, and other companies. By 2019, approximately $130 million was contributed, mostly by Elon Musk. The other commitments remain uncollected. Later in 2019, the real money started rolling in. Microsoft invested $1 billion and Azure became the exclusive cloud provider. 3 years later, Microsoft provided an additional $10 billion and began planning the Stargate collaboration with Oracle and OpenAI. These were actual investment, not merely commitments. Later, in 2023, a number of leading venture capital firms collectively invested about $300 million. While this was not a relatively huge investment, it secured the involvement of professionals who understand how to develop businesses. Shortly after, on November 17th of 2023, the new board abruptly fired Sam Altman, citing lack of candor and trust. In a 70-page internal dossier, the board alleged a consistent pattern of lying, which was backed by screenshots and other communications. Immediately, 702 of the 770 employees signed an open letter threatening to quit to join Altman at Microsoft. Remember, at that point, Microsoft had invested $11 billion. Well, 5 days later, on November 22nd, Altman was reinstated and nearly the entire board of directors was replaced. It would be interesting to know the details behind this unusual sequence of events, which has come to be known as the blip. Perhaps the board of directors and employees were acting on advice they received from ChatGPT. The valuation continued to increase through 2024, not because of the company's ability to generate profits, but rather because of additional investments from customers and suppliers, specifically Microsoft and NVIDIA. At this point, banks began to lend against the tangible assets required to build out the infrastructure. OpenAI will have to pay hefty interest charges before it can return anything to investors. Early in 2025, SoftBank led the largest private funding in world history, totaling $40 billion. At that point, amid a very public feud with Elon Musk, OpenAI restructured itself as a for-profit company. Microsoft's stake at that point was valued at $135 billion. So how big is OpenAI? Well, OpenAI generated $13 billion in sales in 2025 and is on track to generate $20 billion in 2026. It's worth noting that 20% of this revenue is given directly back to Microsoft. That percentage will gradually decrease to 8%, but sustained profitability is not expected until at least the end of the decade. This graph shows a revenue comparison between Microsoft and OpenAI. Despite their status change to for-profit, they remain absolutely a nonprofit organization. By the end of 2025, suppliers AWS and NVIDIA provided non-dilutive commitments of $38 billion and $100 billion, respectively. Even the Walt Disney Company threw an additional $1 billion wrapped around an IP licensing deal, bringing the total amount invested to date to $190 billion. The actual valuation of the company is, of course, impossible to know. It becomes even more difficult to estimate when the circular nature of these investments is considered. If NVIDIA gives OpenAI $100 billion and OpenAI uses it to buy $100 billion worth of chips from NVIDIA, has there really been any increase in the value of either company? And how frequently will OpenAI need to upgrade its hardware? NVIDIA is on track to sell $200 billion worth of chips this year. So if OpenAI bought the entire $100 billion worth of chips, it would be half of NVIDIA's revenue. Now, we can't easily find out what OpenAI plans to buy from NVIDIA, but they do measure their infrastructure build-out in how many gigawatts of power it consumes. OpenAI has announced that they plan to expand power consumption to 10 gigawatts. Each gigawatt requires about $35 billion worth of NVIDIA chips to consume that much power. This implies that OpenAI will spend $350 billion on NVIDIA chips to consume the extra 10 gigawatts that they've declared. To understand how much power this is, Las Vegas continuously consumes about a half a gigawatt. So OpenAI plans to consume about 20 times what Las Vegas consumes. 10 gigawatts is also about 5 times the peak output of Hoover Dam. This is almost twice the power draw of New York City, which is 6 gigawatts. It's close to the power draw of Chicago and Los Angeles combined, which amount to 10.2 gigawatts. This puts OpenAI squarely in the power consumption territory of mining Bitcoin. And that's just OpenAI Stargate, and only their immediate expansion plans. Now, Microsoft has signed a 20-year agreement to purchase the entire output of the restarted Unit 1 reactor at 3 Mile Island. Note, this is a different reactor than Unit 2, which is the one that melted down in 1979. Sam Altman has publicly outlined an infrastructure expansion to 30 gigawatts of electrical power consumption. That's more than 2.5 times what the U.S. military consumes with its 13,000 aircraft, 11 supercarriers, 71 nuclear submarines, 400 additional ships, 800 military bases, 4,666 Abrams tanks, 5,900 helicopters, countless intercontinental ballistic missiles, and the entire Pentagon building. That's about 7% of what the entire country consumes. And it requires about $1 trillion worth of NVIDIA GPUs alone. OpenAI certainly is a powerful idea. The total required investment is projected to be $1.4 trillion, which, of course, will have to be raised. This is more than twice as much as has been raised for all AI companies to date. This would extrapolate to a valuation for OpenAI approaching $10 trillion. Since 2017, a total approaching $1 trillion has been invested in all AI startups. These companies are collectively valued at $2.9 trillion. In fact, about 500 of them are ranked as unicorns with valuations exceeding $1 billion each. The top 10 exceed $1 trillion collectively. At some point, all of these trillions are going to have to generate some profits to return to investors. Side note to Elon, $1 quadrillion US stacked would reach Mars during its closest proximity to Earth. To put this in a different perspective, there are about 1,500 unicorn companies in the world. The total valuation is about $5.6 trillion. So, only 1/3 of all the unicorns are AI startups, yet they represent 2/3 of the valuation of all unicorn startups. The 10 most profitable companies in the world combined generate $845 billion in profits on $2.8 trillion in sales. Their collective market cap, a measure of their value, is about $26 trillion. That equates to a price-to-earnings ratio of about 30.77, which is just slightly better than the companies in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. If OpenAI were to justify its valuation at $10 trillion, it would be more than twice as valuable as Google, Apple, NVIDIA, or Microsoft. It would be more valuable than TSMC, JP Morgan, Meta, Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon, and Saudi Aramco combined. In terms of aligning its PE ratio with the most profitable companies, OpenAI would have to generate $308 billion in profits. OpenAI will have to somehow get there from its current $20 billion in projected profitless revenue. They will have to grow 150-fold, and they would have to become the most valuable company on Earth. I'm not even sure if NVIDIA would be as profitable, even after selling the $350 billion worth of GPUs to OpenAI that it would require. There may not be enough room for the other 499 AI unicorns either, not Anthropic, xAI, Mistral, Perplexity, DeepMind, DeepSeek, or even IBM Watson. And there will be competition. Project Prometheus was started in 2025 with $6.2 billion, largely from Jeff Bezos. They have assembled 100 AI engineers lured away from other AI startups. It's touted as an AI for the physical economy. This will be the first attempt to try to create an AI with a knowledge of the physical world. It would be better trained in math and physics than the large language models that we've become familiar with. Such awareness would be necessary if AI is to replace large numbers of human workers who have an innate natural ability to manipulate objects in the physical world. OpenAI does not yet appear to have addressed this challenge. But even if they do find a way to teach AI about the physical world, will there be economic room for all these companies? That's unlikely. Whether or not AI represents a bubble may have more to do with what the economy looks like in a few years and how much unprofitable revenue investors are willing to tolerate. Unprofitable revenue certainly cannot be sustained. One final thought regarding the profitability of AI platforms. Software companies spend a tremendous amount on R&D to develop new products. But once the code is completed and tested, it can be sold to new customers by simply delivering a copy of the bits. The incremental cost to do this is very, very small. There is a bit of support required, but it doesn't consume large amounts of corporate resources. In the case of AI, the arrays of GPUs that consume all those gigawatts of power must be powered, cooled, maintained, and frequently upgraded. The incremental cost of the power alone to support additional customers is astronomical compared to the costs for traditional software companies. So when we consider that no AI companies are profitable today, we must question what the cost of AI might have to become to be profitable in the future while facing these rising costs. Companies that build future plans based on AI that they purchase must make assumptions about future costs of that AI. They should be worried because no one really knows what the costs might have to be, especially to allow these AI companies to cross over into profitability. The entire economy of the United States in 2026 is projected to be $33 trillion. I suppose there's some version of an altered future reality in which OpenAI could replace 50 million workers and become a third of the US economy. It will certainly consume more power than the other two-thirds, but I'm not too worried because Elon will gladly volunteer SpaceX to transport OpenAI servers to the naturally cool vacuum of outer space.